On this, the June 13th, 2023 edition of What's Going On with Shipping, the government is here to help on the west coast of the United States. Oh boy. I'm your host, Al Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, we've been following the ongoing negotiations between the ILWU, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, and that of the Pacific Maritime Association, the PMA. Well, we're seeing slowdowns, we're seeing instances of delays in ports, and it's coming to a head in certain areas. And now the U.S. government has announced they've dispatched the acting Secretary of Labor, Julie Su, out to the West Coast to meet with both the ILWU and the PMA. We're going to look at this story, break it down, and see what is exactly happening on the West Coast. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So this is a story from Mike Schuller over on G Captain. There's a good little recap on it if you want to read it. I'll have the link in the show notes. West Coast War of Worlds, War of Words. PMA and ILWU trade blows in labor dispute. And let me be clear, they are. They are vocally going at each other. You can see that on their Twitter feed. So this is a PMA statement from yesterday, June 12th. Update on West Coast operations. Basically, what is happening here is the PMA is saying the ILWU resumed its past practices of withholding lashers from terminals at the nation's largest port complex, resulting in vessels having to miss their scheduled departures. Lashers are those who secure the containers in place on board the vessel. The union also did not fill out orders for labor for several terminal operators, despite the fact that they were properly placed and on time. Specifically, they're talking about the port of Seattle, where they're saying that disruptive work actions led to containerized terminal operations coming to a halt. In some cases, the union slowed down operations, resulting in longshore workers being sent home. So I've been following what's been going on in Seattle quite a bit. And what you're seeing happening is the PMA is calling out worker gangs to work the vessels, much smaller number of gangs than they normally would, whereas you would have 2 to 3 gangs work a ship, you're getting maybe 1. Then the production is slow, less than, I believe, 16 containers an hour coming off. And what the PMA is doing is when they see that slow level of movement, they're firing the gangs at 10 a.m. before they have to pay them for the whole day. And so you have the union calling out laborers, the laborers are showing up, but they're not moving fast, and then they fire them. And both sides point fingers at each other. I had somebody who was in Seattle observe the fact that the containers were coming off slower than the gondola ride at Disneyland. So not very fast movements going on here. It goes on this talking about the fact that this has been going on for a while. The PMA says for months, the ILWU has staged disruptive work actions targeting the West Coast's largest ports. These actions have either slowed operations or shut them down altogether. Goes on, the union actions have included delaying the daily standard dispatch process, withholding specialized workers, such as cargo handling equipment operators or lashers, making unfounded health and safety claims. That is, you better be sure you can back that one up. Deliberately conducting inspections that are not routine, not scheduled, and done in a way to disrupt terminal operations, and improperly coordinating lunch and union breaks to drain all labor from terminals at the same time. So the union has a really sticking point on some of these, particularly the maintenance issues, which were deferred during COVID, and a lot of maintenance that was supposed to be done has not been done on cranes. And the issue of meals and lunch is another one. It's a really sore point between the two. But it really comes down to the fact that the PMA does not want to give the ILWU a raise retroactively back to when the contract expired, and they want to freeze wages for 3 to 4 years, depending on when you see the start of that period. Same time, the ILWU is targeting the PMA. They're talking about the fact that they have committed to bargaining a contract that is fair and equitable, represents the hard works and contributions of their members. The PMA continues using the media to leverage one-sided information in an attempt to influence the process. Understand, the PMA, made up of the big shipping companies, has made record profits. They made record profits again this quarter. I mean, they've made bigger profits than they have, except for the last 2 years, in a decade. And they have instituted bonuses, they have given pay raises to their members, but they don't want to do that to the ILWU. And there's a lot of finger pointing that the ILWU makes this huge amount of money, which is a small portion of the ILWU, but I have yet to see anyone talk about how much money the terminal operators, the shipping lines executives, all these people make. So, when they start pointing fingers at how much somebody else makes, that's not a good argument, in my opinion. Then you have the situation where the Canadian ILWU, not the American, but the Canadian ILWU, just authorized a potential West Coast port strike on June 9th and 10th. They had a vote of their membership to determine whether or not they were in support of a potential strike against the member companies of the British Columbia Maritime Employees Association, the BCMEA. Oh my God, these guys are worse at acronyms than the military. Can be clear? I don't know why we have all these acronyms, but we do. So the vote of the Canadian ILWU members was 99.24% in favor of going on strike. I'm not sure who the 0.76% was, but this is overwhelming. This is like, this is like Napoleon referendum numbers here, and some sort of Central American dictator or something like that numbers here. But obviously the union is in full force of this. So you have a potential for slowdowns, lockout strikes, not just on the American West Coast, but now we're talking about the Canadian West Coast, Vancouver, Prince Rupert. This is catastrophic if this happens. So all of that boils down to this. This is a letter that came out from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to President Biden from Susanna Clark, the president and CEO, on June 9th. So the Chamber of Commerce is very concerned by the premeditated and disruptive service actions that are slowing operations at several major ports along the West Coast during the ongoing negotiation between the ILWU and the PMA. Goes on, the current round of labor negotiations began in May of 2022, and while there were initial breakthroughs on healthcare and other benefits, reports indicate that negotiations over pay and other benefits are at a standstill, and it recaps a lot of these issues. What's really interesting is they go back here and look at several events that have happened in the past. 2002, a breakdown in negotiations led to work slowdowns and 11-day shutdown of West Coast ports. President Bush intervened initially by appointing a federal mediator, which was supported by both sides. However, President Bush ultimately obtained a Taft-Hartley injunction to reopen the ports. It was estimated the 11-day shutdown cost the U.S. economy $10 billion. 2008, the ILWU engaged in a day-long work stoppage that shut down all major West Coast ports. In July, 3 weeks of work stoppages started in LA and Long Beach and spread to the Pacific Northwest. Both parties came to an agreement voluntarily. 2014 stalled contract negotiations led to work slowdowns, creating gridlock at ports. A deal was ultimately reached in 2015 after then Labor Secretary Perez helped broker an agreement with the support of the ILWU and the PMA. I can't help but note that they omit the fact that the PMA staged a 10-day lockout of the ILWU and prevented them from going in. This is where it gets really interesting. A serious work stoppage at the ports of LA and Long Beach would likely cost the U.S. economy nearly $500 million today. A more widespread strike along the West Coast could have cost approximately $1 billion a day. The economic cost of a dispute that could result in a port closure would be devastating to consumers and businesses. Goes on here. Importantly, shippers are showing their lack of confidence in the ongoing labor negotiation by diverting cargo away from the West Coast. This has been going on since long before this, but I would argue it's been accelerated now as a result of this. Going on here, West Coast ports are a crucial artery for the nation's transportation infrastructure. Cargo moving through West Coast ports represent an economic value of 12.5% of the U.S. GDP and moving over 50% of all U.S. imports. The best outcome is agreement reached voluntarily by the negotiating parties. But we are concerned over the current sticking point. An impasse over wage and benefits will not be resolved. The ILWU is seeking a doubling of wages over the life of the contract and significant increases in pension benefits, while the marine terminals will not agree to a contract that results in permanent cost increases at a time that demand has decreased from its peaks of 2020, 2021. Again, there's opinion pieces out there talking about that the ILWU missed their opportunity to negotiate during the height of this. ILWU was doing their work. Let's be clear. And both sides didn't come to the table until May of last year. And so, again, I am not coming out in favor of labor or for the shippers or the PMA. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just laying out what the facts are here. And the PMA has made substantial pay raises and bonuses and salary adjustments to their employees. And the ILWU is asking for maybe more, I don't know, but because the PMA doesn't release what their numbers are. But the ILWU is sitting there. The problem is they will not agree to a wage freeze for 4 years. Goes on, we urge you to appoint an independent mediator to help the parties reach a voluntary agreement. As shown, the ILWU PMA have supported similar solutions in past years. And if it is a solution championed by Republican and Democratic administrations, and it's CC'd to the Honorable Julie Su, Acting Secretary of Labor. And that is exactly who's been dispatched to this. Julie Su, according to the story, over on Splash 24/7 by Sam Chambers, Julie Su has been sent out there. Now, Julie Su is, I don't know if it's the right person or not. She was the assistant or the deputy secretary of labor. Then Marty Waltz, the past secretary of labor, left. She is now the acting secretary of labor. She is the President Biden's appointment to replace him, but she has not received a confirmation vote because Republicans have a problem with her because they say she's too close to the unions. And now she is sent out there to deal with a union PMA dispute. So, and based on the reporting that's out of this area, one of the things we do find out is that she has met with the ILWU and the PMA, but not together. They've met separately, which is a problem. You really need to have them in the same room together in San Francisco and iron this out. It doesn't do any good to play telephone here and go back and forth between the two. They really need to get together to hammer out this deal. And what we're seeing here in the data is really important. We're seeing ships beginning to move, but man, it is slow moving. So vessels like the Maersk Antares here got in on June 4th and has been sitting there in LA that whole time. And that's a bit of a problem. MSC Lawrence has come in here. She's been here since June 4th. We just saw one of MSC vessels leave. And as I mentioned earlier here, not everybody in the Pacific Maritime Association is on board with this. Let's be clear. I'm hearing that Mediterranean Shipping Company, the owner company for MSC Lawrence, is pissed about what is happening here. They have told the PMA to get an agreement because they are tired of this disruption, and the thing they didn't want, the Aponte family that owns Mediterranean Shipping Company. Mediterranean Shipping Company is the largest container shipping company in the world, and it's owned by a single family, the Apontes. It's a Swiss-Italian company. They did not want government intervention because they don't like government intervention. And what they got now is government intervention. And so there are elements of the PMA that are pushing for this. You're seeing COSCO vessels. COSCO Denmark shows to be on the berth here in June 8th. This vessel has been off of LA Long Beach since the end of May. And they can't get this vessel off. And so you're seeing these delays. If you want to see where the delays are really prevalent right now, you just have to come up to some of these other areas. So off of Oakland, we're seeing ships standing by, waiting to get in. But the place that has probably the best example here right now is up in Seattle, where most of this issue is happening. If you watched one of my earlier videos, I showed you the vessels that were sitting here off of Terminal 18 in Seattle. They're still sitting here. The Maersk Cairo is still sitting here. The Maersk Cardiff is still sitting here. If I can get it here, there we go. Maersk Cardiff right there, sitting there. But more importantly, the number of vessels in the anchorage are increasing. We're seeing vessels begin to stack up here in the outer anchorages. And that's indicating that big delay is stacking up in Seattle. And as the Chamber of Commerce noted, this can have an impact on the U.S. economy. Add to it a potential strike on the west coast of Canada, and everything from San Diego to Anchorage is now in the potential shutdown area. This is extremely precarious. We really need to resolve this. Nowhere near the scale of what we saw during the supply chain crisis of 2020 and 2021, but this has an impact. It could start creating a series of delays. Fortunately, Demand is down in the United States, so this may not be a big issue, but understand you still need the regular shipment of goods coming in. And what you're seeing is a cascade effect here of delays coming out of those ports. And if this continues, and if you get a shutdown, a lockout, a strike, whatever it is, for a period of time, this could be a problem. The best thing that we can hope for that comes out of this is a cooling down period. Everybody agrees to take a step back, go back to normal work, and then come back to the table with a potential mediator in place and sit down and hammer out an agreement that both sides will agree to and move on from it. Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a big thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you can hit the super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon. You'll see a link at the end of the video and down in the show notes where you can become a monthly or yearly subscriber. I don't want to be on a 4-year wage freeze like the ILWU is under the PMA right now. So if you can, support the page. Until our next video, this is Sal signing off.